This is the Business Stuff Podcast. This is where I will share the lessons I've learned from advising thousands of businesses over almost 30 years. Each episode will give you practical insight to allow you to learn from other people's mistakes. I'll be pulling in experts from our team and the world of business, and together we'll make sure your business is giving you what you want. My name is Martin, and this is the Business Stuff Podcast. Hi, it's Marty from the Accelerator team. I'm here with JP. How are you doing, JP?
Very good, very good.
It's John Paul Addison.
It is, yes.
Yeah. The full
That's the one,
name,
yes.
But JP. And we're here to talk about the problem with training. People are spending a fortune on training. It's sometimes just not landing.
Yeah, so I've worked in corporate, commercial businesses for over 20 years, specialising in learning and development. And I think one of the biggest issues that I've seen is there's lots of money, and I think there's billions and billions of pounds spent on training, and how much of it actually sticks. So, you're spending so much money, and most businesses want a return on investment, of course they do. So really, people aren't getting the bang for the buck, and behaviours aren't changing, and people go and at the end of the course to get what we call a happy sheet. How much would you give out of 10 for this course? I really loved the trainer, 10 out of 10. I really enjoyed the training. I learned so much, 10 out of 10. I get a certificate, the hotel was nice, everything was brilliant, and then they go back to work and nothing changes.
And this, so as a business owner, this is a frustration because, of course, you've taken time away from production.
Mm-hmm.
Not off work. Notice I didn't say that because I think training is work.
Yeah.
So you haven't taken time off work, but you've taken time off production probably, and also spent money, and then probably not seen the result you want. So this causes some employers to then simply not invest in training.
Yeah,
and you might go, well, that's not bad. Yeah, the training wasn't working. So what do you think people are doing? I mean, what's wrong with this then?
Well, I think in a lot of cases, and in the example I'd use, somewhere that I used to work with, they had a brochure course or a catalogue of training, and it was kind of picked out. So I fancy doing time management training, or how to be an effective coach, or how to do presentation skills. And all that happens is they go, well, that sounds a little bit like what I'm looking for. They pick it, they run the course, but they haven't done any discovery. Like if you're doing any sales, you would do a discovery, a fact find to understand what's going on. And I think a lot of businesses don't really uncover the real issue. What they'll do is they'll look at the symptoms. And I think very much like a doctor, it's about fixing the cause rather than the symptoms.
Yeah.
So
you've got a rash because you're not eating right.
Yes.
So here's a cream for the rash.
Yes, and I think too many L&D professionals want to learn and development.
For the audience.
Really want to help and want to kind of produce a product. But I think also that they don't really, and I think this is in different organisations that I've worked with as well, is they don't have the authority to sit and kind of challenge. So when they get asked to do a course or a training event, it's very much dictated to from on high.
That's interesting because if you've got 1,000 people in your team and 84 of them tick the one, sale training day, they'll go, we'll get someone to deliver a sale training day, and they'll deliver what they've been asked to train. So it's not even that the trainer is doing it wrong. It's just somewhere between the perceived need and the delivery. Then they're not actually solving the thing.
They're not solving
maybe the best day sale training ever, but it's to someone who doesn't need sales training. Is that the problem?
Yeah. So the daft analogy I always give is somebody gets put on a time management course. And then when you kind of uncover what the real reason why they were put on the time management course is, they keep turning up to work late.
Yeah.
So being effective at, being productive, it's still not going to fix the issue. That person might have an attitudinal issue. Because
if you miss the first hour, it doesn't matter how good the next 6 are. Missing the first hour was the problem. Is that what you...
Well,
so fix the wrong problem.
They're fixing the wrong problem. They're trying to fix the problem. So a big part of what we should be doing when we start looking at developing our teams and our people is thinking from an individual point of view what the requirements are. And I think that's why coaching is such a powerful tool, because the learning is individualized to the need of the person rather than a sheep dip approach. But also I think learning development professionals, and they need to stop being order takers and just kind of saying, oh, you want to do a course, I'll put that on for you. So a big part of it is kind of sitting down and scoping out where the real issues are. So I think a big part of what lots of businesses miss is they don't do any real analysis. You know, there's so much around, you know, root cause analysis, but I think that's one of the things that training doesn't do. They don't actually do the root cause, so therefore they're producing the wrong thing.
Is that a time pressure, or is it just businesses think, well, they've asked for time management, we'll deliver time? Is it a knowledge gap or a time gap, or is it, what do you think?
I don't think so, because as I said, billions of pounds are spent on training, but I think...
But largely or often is a tick box, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, we said we would train people 50 hours a year, and we've done it, right? It's done.
Yeah, and I think, again, there's, in lots of corporate organisations, they measure training by the amount of hours that's been delivered, rather than the results that it's receiving. And I think far too many businesses, certainly when it comes to developing their people, are focused on the outputs rather than the inputs. So what do we want people to deliver? Right, we'll put them on this thing to get them to that point. But what is the inputs? You know, you don't go to the gym and once get a perfect body. It's the consistency of...
It takes work.
It takes work.
Yeah.
So for me, it's very much a case of understanding the exercises, the activities that get you to the output, rather than just saying, I want my team to be better at sales, I want my team to be more motivated and engaged.
So is this then, JP? Is it just trying to explore what this means on the ground then? So you might have someone who isn't hitting their sales target, and you teach them how to, you know, leave a pause after giving the price and all of the old cliched things. But it could just be that they don't understand their product, or that they're hitting the wrong audience. Is that what you mean? You go back in the production line to figure out?
Well, yeah, I think it should be reversed engineered all the way through. And I think in terms of, it might not necessarily be just the technique of cold calling or objection handling or whatever it may be. It might be a core belief that they've got. For example, in the sales context, my mum and dad told me not to talk to strangers. So if I've got that limiting belief in my mind... If
you're paid to knock on strangers' doors all day, that's going to get you.
So unless that is unwound and fixed, you're always going to have subconsciously, I shouldn't be doing this. So then the behaviour that you will elude will be different than what would be required. So again, this is why I'm kind of a massive advocate for coaching that helps unwind and uncover that limited belief, and then you can fix that rather than just put them on a course.
So if I'm an employer, I mean, I also coach, so I'm saying this as devil's advocate. If I'm an employer and I think, yeah, but JP, it sounds like you just want to spend loads of time with my people off production, one-to-one, that sounds expensive, time consuming. How the hell am I, like, you know, that's a big ask, man. Like, how will I know this is going to work?
Well, again, there's always an element of faith with these kind of things, but in terms of, it doesn't have to be every single person needs to come off production. It very much is a case of sitting down with stakeholders, understanding the problems, sitting down with individuals. It's not a case of you have to do laborious fact-finding with every single person. It's very much a case of, and I always kind of start this when I do any training, which is sitting down with the stakeholders, the people that this is going to impact in terms of line managers and things like that. And I also try to get a bit of a feel for people in the field who are working and understand where the problems are, and then create a bit of a bespoke training package for their requirements. But also, obviously being in the industry for 20 years, I see a lot of synergies and similarities. So I suppose I've got some kind of quick wins with things to move things forward when I see a particular problem kind of present itself.
Yeah.
And this is obviously why I like the psychometric and the psychological background, because it gives you a bit of a shortcut to understanding how people perceive the world, how they believe, and why people behave.
Because it's interesting, you're not, and we'll come on to this, but it sounds like you're not talking about here the technical side of give the brochure step one, point at the image, point. We don't mean the procedural side of the thing you're trying to train, do we? We're trying to unlock the reason why they're not doing it, which isn't it's not that they don't know the process, it's that they don't believe in it, or they don't believe in themselves, or whatever. Just before I explore that a bit though, like, what you talked about the return on investment earlier. You didn't directly say that, but you said people will say, well, we've satisfied the number of hours we were meant to train. How should people be measuring the return on investment then? Because I presume that's where the proof in the pudding is. Well, you've been doing this for 20 years and nothing's happened. We've done it different this year, and like, do people often measure the wrong thing, and what should they measure?
Well, I don't want to kind of get into the technical aspects of training and learning, but there was a really simple model, Kirkpatrick's model of evaluation, and the 4 stages of, what was your reaction, which is the happy sheets.
Yeah.
The second level is the knowledge. Do they know? Can they pass a test, for example? Then you've
Have they remembered what you told them? Yeah.
Has there been a behavioural change? And then ultimately, what are the results? So again, it's different things are a little bit easier to measure. So for example, in sales, it's very easy to say this person is hitting X amount. After the training, they're hitting Y amount. So there's a tangible way to look at the results. But for example, if the needle's only moved by 100 quid, but the course has cost you 1,000 quid, then there hasn't been a return on investment.
Yeah.
And I always kind of work in the kind of 10x space, which is if you spend £100 on training, the result difference should be £1,000, and that can be measured in a lot of different ways. It could be...
That's assuming you're aiming for sales. You might actually just want happier people or better cohesion within the team, or which isn't always necessarily an instant result, is it?
I think business owners want to know, how does this...
Yeah.
If I'm going to invest, I want some return.
Oh, at some point, but it might not be that they walk out and sell more the next day. It might be that the staff turnover reduces massively, which means you recruit less. In terms of staff turnover, the average cost of replacing someone in the UK is £25,000. Yeah. So if you were to save 10 people by putting people on this training course, straight away you've got your return. That's what I mean. It's not necessarily more sales, bigger turnover. It might turn up somewhere else in your books.
Yes, and another one is an engaged workforce will typically be more productive by around about 25%. So again, it might not necessarily be sales where it's a lot easier to quantify. Yeah. It could be somebody in the finance department, for example, who's working 25% more effectively. So therefore, if you get 4 people working 25% more effectively, that saves the wage cost of having an extra head.
You've got an extra person, yeah. So so we see this when we're talking to people and they talk about how they're going to measure something, and we often find they go for the simple measure, which isn't actually, or they set a target based on the wrong thing. We want more sales calls made. Do you care about how good they were? No, just make more calls. Hi there, right, see you. Well, that was one. Hi there. Wow, yeah, I can get through thousands. Yeah, but that's not what we wanted. And I think sometimes you can set a target without thinking about what you can actually encourage from your team, can't you?
Yeah, and I've seen it very much with sales teams that I've worked with. It's about working smart and hard. Yeah. And I think far too many people kind of focus on, let's just work harder.
Yeah. So you mentioned the behavioural change then, and earlier you said that we touched on it's not just the technical following of the process. Mm-hmm. How do you explore that then? Because we've all heard loads of different ideas about, you need to understand your people. How do you approach that then?
So,
or how should people approach it?
Not so long ago, I became an insights practitioner, and there's lots of different, I feel like I'm on the BBC, there's lots of other psychometric tests out there which you can use.
Other washing detergents are available. Tell us about what you do though, there's nothing wrong with that.
In terms of, there's lots of different models, Myers-Briggs, DISC, and a plethora of others. And in terms of, it all kind of is based on Carl Jung's theories of personalities and why people behave the way that they do. And for me, the reason why I prefer insights discovery over the other, it's because it sticks. It creates a common language. So throughout an organisation, people can talk about it in a very simplistic term, and people get it.
Which was one of your key things you said.
Yes.
One of your 4 tests, did they remember it?
And I think that's it. Going back to what we were saying before about that return of investment, you want it to stick and you want it to be used. And I think over the years of doing lots of training, what I've found is that this is probably the most sticky thing that I've come across because it's simple. And I always explain it to people. I could train this to kids and the kids would get it. Yeah. And if that's the case, then that should be able to work across any organisation and any
average
team.
Workforce should also get it then.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's why I kind of went with this. I think in terms of why I prefer Insights is because it's just a very simple 4-colour model. Myers-Briggs gives you a set of letters, and I've asked this question many times. Can you remember your 4 letters? Yeah. I'm an ENTF or whatever it may be. And people go, no, I can't remember. But I can go back to people who've done Insights, even not through myself, who've done it a couple of years ago. What's the colour that you lead with? And they'll always go, I lead with yellow, and I lead with red. And that's like years after the event.
And it sounds like what you're saying here is if you said that to someone who would also, you go, oh, you're a yellow, well, I'm a red.
Yes.
I know what that means.
Yes, and so a big part of this, and this kind of goes back to the point, is the insights that we work through is that self-awareness piece. So this is how I see the world. This is how I act. I appreciate that. The way that I naturally will react or behave might not necessarily get us the things that I want to achieve. Yeah. So it's that real self-realization of actually this is the thing I need to work on. And I think the reason why I always go back to this is because it's a foundation stone for everything else. If I'm a self-aware salesperson, that will help me sell to different people. If I'm a self-aware leader, it helps me lead different types of people. So for me, going back to all of this stuff around why training doesn't work half the time, it's because we keep going through the technique and we don't really understand who we are and who others are.
You said earlier, it's a saying which I'd not really heard before, but as soon as you said it makes a lot of sense, the sheep tip approach. Mm-hmm. Everyone gets the same thing. And, but we're not sheep, are we?
No.
To state something blatantly obvious, but...
And I think, in terms of the people who watch this podcast, you probably find a lot of leaders will have high, direct results, focus, be driven, be determined, and they'll want everybody in their team to be like that. And I think a major frustration with a lot of leaders is why aren't people like this? Where is the get up and go?
Yeah.
And actually that only really equates for something like 25% of society. So you're trying to motivate people the way that you're motivated, but that won't motivate 75% of the people.
Of course, yeah.
In terms of sales, you will sell like you like to buy, but you're only really able to sell to 25%.
You'll sell to people like you.
Like you.
Yeah, kindred spirits.
So for me, this is the foundation and cornerstone of any training programs that I run. Yes, I do sales, I do leadership stuff, but understanding this, it's the launch pad. And then when you're talking about leadership, you can say, okay, so this is the style of leadership you're demonstrating, and reverting back to the colours. So that's kind of where I prefer the inside stuff, because it's just so sticky.
How, again, employers might be sitting there going, yeah, again, this is all fine, and that makes sense. 75% of what we're training to people isn't landing because we trained it the wrong way. But we haven't got time, man. We can't sit people aside for a day and figure out what colour they are. Obviously you might go, well, yeah, but if you invest in that, everything else will then stick. You're solving the the data loss on the back end, it's not going to happen anymore. How long does it take to get this feel, like for people to know what they are and understand it?
Well, in terms of...
Is this the first half hour of a day's worth of sales training, or is it a...
Well, if I was to do a sales session, for example, I would recommend doing 2 days. So day one is very much understanding the model, understanding ourselves, kind of... We kind of then lead into how that impacts how you communicate to different people, whether that's, you know, within a sales context or a team's context, or even just in your team dynamic.
Yeah.
So how that works in that way. And then specifically on day two, whether it's sales or leadership, I would then talk about, you know, how this relates to them elements. And I think in terms of why that works is because you can always revert back to what you learned the day before. Yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be 2 days in a chunk. And I would probably always recommend, if you're doing any training, have space in between. So then you can take away the concepts, think about it, and then when you come back in a week's time, a month's time or whatever, you need that space. You
need to bed in day one. I always think it's hilarious. My wife used to work at the university and they would do 2-day training courses. And they'd always go away, and it always just felt like the second day was wasted because everyone just drank themselves stupid at the end of day one. It's like, whoever thought that was a good idea? I just think they all liked a night away. She hated it. She
and I think this is kind of going back to what you were saying in terms of...
It's like, well, we may as well enjoy it. It's like, that's not why you're here.
A lot of off-sites, people do go, it's a bit of a jolly.
Yeah.
And I think that's all fine and well intended.
Where are we going this year? Not what are we learning this year?
Yes, so team building activities, absolutely do it if you want to kind of make a togetherness, but don't use training as a team building activity and have the drinking in between, because all you're doing, and I've seen it before, people turn up on the second day, they're hungover and they just can't wait to get home, and therefore they're not learning.
Do you think we'll get away early? Yeah. Everyone's asked that on the second day of anything, haven't they? Do you think we'll get away early? Mm-hmm. So everyone wants to get away early, don't they? What do people need to be thinking of here then, JP? So we're coming into less like 5 minutes or so to go. What's the biggest issue that people are getting wrong on here then? It sounds like you're saying don't do 2 days in a row with an overnight, keep the drink out of it. That should have been obvious always, really, shouldn't it?
I think for me, the biggest issue is go back to what you're trying to fix and go a little bit deeper. I'm a big fan of Toyota's 5 Whys.
Yeah,
so
I wrote that down earlier and I forgot to mention it, but yeah.
So it's, right, we have a problem with sales. Why? Because we aren't getting in front of enough customers. Why? Because our sales team aren't picking up the phone enough. Why? And by the time you've went 5 levels down,
that the product is right for them. Well, why is that? They don't know the product, and eventually you get like, oh well, you're so far away from the output that the input is nowhere near it, is it?
What I've interestingly found with this as well, the more that you dig, it turns from a logical reason into an emotional reason.
Yeah,
and
because I don't like the cars we make. Oh, that's it. We're never going to sell them then.
Yes. So going 5 levels deep, you will always uncover, but I think too many people, they'll just say, this is the surface problem, let's fix the surface problem. And my old manager, and I always get this quote wrong, but the kind of emphasis is, for every 1,000 hacks at the leaves of evil, you're hitting the root once. Or something along them lines. I always get that quote wrong, but it's basically too many businesses just spend so much time and money on the surface level problems, and they never ever get to the cause.
I mean, a classic example with a car, for instance, just to use your Toyota to continue with them, and it's no wonder for anyone who's ever studied coaching minded, no wonder why Toyota became the size they were, with the continual improvement and everything else. But or sales, we're not selling, we need to spend more on our adverts. We need to get some celebrities involved. It's like, no, actually it's that the cars weren't reliable, or we've priced for the wrong market. We've built a minivan, but we're selling it at a Lamborghini price. It's like, it's so often not the thing you think, and I love that when you're working with people and you go below and you go again and again. It's not always a fixed 5. We're just saying 5 because that's what the model is. But you might go down. It might take them multiple sessions to get to what the core is. But when you realise that and you see it in the person, they kind of go, that's right, okay, that makes sense. And I think I love those moments when you're working with people, when their eyes open and they go, right, yeah, actually it's not that I'm not making I'm making all the calls, I'm following the script, I'm ringing the wrong people. Wow, got it. Wow,
I'll never forget, years and years ago, I was doing some performance coaching at a sales company, very heavy cold calling, and the guy was saying the script word for word perfectly, like unbelievable, couldn't fault his pitch in any way, shape or form, but he was a bit of a stoner, and he was like, hello, my name is such and such, how are you doing today?
He's got the wrong energy.
So there was no passion or energy. So again, this is the thing which I said before, is too many businesses focusing on the technique, not the behaviour or the belief. Harvard Business Review looked at this a couple of years ago and said that the way that people are successful, or what makes successful people, is their ability to communicate. 87% of success with people is how they communicate, not what they say. Yeah. So where does all of the training budget go? It goes on to the 17% of technical skills, and very little go on to the
13% you got in maths.
Well, you're the accountant.
But don't worry. Listen, JP, that we're going to call it there. That's fascinating, and I always like to hear people approach things in a different way, and I think that's what you're doing exactly. So we hope you enjoyed that chat. Thank you. And we always welcome any feedback and comments as well, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you
very much.